So in this talk, we're going to be looking at Temple Grandin again, but in particular, we're going to be looking at how did she take this rewired brain and how did she make a real creative contribution in her field, a very particular field of study. So we mentioned in the last talk that in the frontal lobe of Temple Grandin's brain, because of her autism, she could think about individual things quite well and quite thoroughly, but it was hard to put those things together. And we also talked about the fact that really words weren't a great communication tool for her. As she says, she tended to think in pictures. And she says that words are kind of a second language for her. So whereas other people are dealing with things verbally, she's taking pictures in her head. And she even describes it as, I not only have still pictures, I have whole kind of VCR tapes with sound of experiences I've had. And she then plays those back to help her understand how to deal with the problem. So what she's doing is she's taking all of her experiences and she's categorizing them. And because she has this almost savant capability to memorize and retain that information, she then is able to go back and kind of categorically look at it and make connections that other people might not make. Being autistic, she says, I didn't naturally assimilate information that most people take for granted. When she recalls something she's learned, she sort of plays this video in her imagination. And she runs these images over and over, and then she'll study them to try to solve the problem. She says she always starts with the specifics, and then she goes to the general. And that helps her kind of get a perspective that other people wouldn't have. She's not making her brain normal. She's finding a way to take the unique characteristics of her brain and to use them in a very, very specialized way. She says it's as if I were attempting to figure out the picture of a jigsaw puzzle, but only a third of the puzzle is complete. She can't make those immediate connections other people would make. She has to go back and sort of, assimilate everything in a completely different way. So when she's dealing with animals, and she primarily was interested in her professional life in dealing with cows. And she says that she uses her visual thinking skills to simulate what an animal would see or hear. She puts herself in the position of the animal. And because cattle have this very wide panoramic view, they're prey animals, so their eyes are not on the front of their head like ours, they're on their side of their head. So they get more than 180-degree view. And that was important because, if they're a prey animal and somebody's going to attack them any moment. So that mountain lion may be coming from the peripheral view and they're able to see it. But she kind of gets herself inside the way they see things. And also the fact that because they are prey animals, they have to be constantly wary of what's going on. They have to be watchful. And anything that's out of place or irregular could be a sign that they're in danger. So she's very conscious of the psychology of a prey animal. And she says that's because, to some extent, it's like I feel as an autistic person. I've got to constantly be wary of being ambushed by something I don't understand, that other people take for granted and they know, but it's surprising and it can ambush me. So she really relates to the position of these cattle. And she understands their kind of fearfulness and as if she's in a world of dangerous predators. She says that it's unlikely that anybody besides her would have noticed the sounds that upset these animals. but it's the same kind of sound that's almost unbearable to an autistic child. So she's able to really relate to the way these animals respond. She says the reaction of cattle to something out of place may be similar to the reaction of autistic children to small discrepancies in their environment. And she talks about this one instance where she's out observing these wranglers handling these cattle. And they're trying to get the cattle to move into this gate and through it. But it's a hot day, and one of the wranglers has taken off his shirt, and he threw it on the fence right by the gate. And it's a red shirt. And she's seeing that these animals will not go through that gate. They're moving them toward the gate, and they'll just shut off and not go through that gate. And it's because that red shirt is there, because that's not normally there on that fence. And that's irregular, and it makes the animals apprehensive and fearful about it. But she could relate to how that small discrepancy in the environment would upset the cattle and cause them not to do what the wranglers want them to do. So clearly, she's using her brain to do things that other people could not understand. So the situation she's dealing with primarily is this very awkward situation on many cattle operations where they're trying to move the animals. And it may be because they're moving them from one pasture to another pasture. It may be that they're taking them to the slaughterhouse. It may be that they just need to inoculate them or something like that. And now, in her era, we were moving from cattle, being in a pasture on a range, to cattle being in these concentrating feed operations. And so there's a lot more dealing with the cattle and wrangling the cattle and trying to get them to go where you want them to go. And I know, because I dealt with cattle all of my youth, it is not easy to get a cow to go where they don't want to go. They have a mind of their own. But she's understanding this very well. And this little illustration right here is one of her designs for how you move cattle. Let's say they've been in a pasture over here, and you're trying to load them up onto trucks and take them to another pasture. Normally, that would be extremely difficult and traumatic for these cattle, and for the cattle wranglers as well. And it can mean, at first, it's her being empathetic to the cattle. And this is a weird thing. She doesn't care if you're taking those cows to the slaughterhouse and you're going to make hamburger out of them. It's not that she thinks you shouldn't be eating cattle. She doesn't have that kind of protective inclination. But it really bothers her when you upset the cattle, when you give them emotional trauma, because she can kind of relate to that as an autistic person. And at first, it's just an emotional thing. She wants to help these cattle. But then she's understood that there's an economic thing going on here, because when these wranglers get these cattle all upset, they start stampeding, they start running over each other, they damage each other, they kill each other, so there's loss of your herd there. So she realized there's an economic advantage to moving these cattle smoothly and not getting them all upset. So this is what her device is doing. So you'd bring a large group of cattle in like this, and slowly you move them around. Cattle don't like right angles. They need to be moved very slowly around. And at that point, this gate opens like that, and then they funnel into single file. And that's the best way to control them, is when they're in single file. And so they're going around in single file, again, very slow curves, no right angles, and eventually they go on to the truck there. But even the three-dimensional version of this, the wranglers are up at a slightly higher level. The cows are at a lower level. There's a tall wall, so they can't see anything distracting them. They just see ahead there. And even the fact it's painted this blue color That's the most soothing color for the cattle. So she's moving them with as little upset and as little distraction and as little crazy making as she possibly can to get them to go where she wants them to go. Now, at first, oh my God, she would throw these ideas out, and these cattle wranglers thought she was nuts. And they let her know it. And they gave her a very, very hard time. And she had a rough career. She's in this guy's world, and she's one of the few women. And she, as an autistic person, she has overcome so much. But you definitely know she's autistic. The way she talks, the way she moves, her manner of expression, this kind of dearth of emotion. She's different. And these guys, they didn't handle that very well. And they're really mean to her. But slowly, she has convinced them that her way is better and that it is economically advantageous to the cattle owners. And now these devices are in cattle moving operations all over the world. And she has made this huge contribution to animal husbandry, which is her field. Now, the remarkable thing is, here's this woman who started with this. I mean, she could have even sort of been just catatonic for most of her life. Just sat there and, like autistic people like to do, rock like this. But she had this mentor of a mom who said, nope, not going to happen. And she said, nope, we're not doing the rocking thing. Yes, we are going to learn to talk, and we're going to learn to read. They found a way to utilize the capabilities of the brain she had. She had this mentor, Mr. Carlock, who helped her understand how to relate to other people and how to understand when I'm doing something kind of socially stupid and how to correct that. And then she had this great mentor, Aunt Burkeen, who got her interested in cattle, and she got into the kind of psychology of the cattle and being able to see parallels between her experience of the world and their experience of the world. And out of that, she makes this great creative leap that is a huge economic benefit to the entire cattle industry. What a remarkable story of neuroplasticity. Now, I want to just, in closing here, just make a point of how all of these words we've been talking about, many of them from the first 10 terms, some of them from the second 10 terms, but this woman has almost every one of those. She has values. That notion of it is not right to upset that cow. I know how that feels, and that is not right to upset that cow, and that's driving a lot of her creativity. And she has this vision there. Why are you upsetting all these cows? Why are you making them stampede each other? There is a way to do this where they're much calmer, and it's going to be better for everybody. And then she has the patience and the tenacity and the intelligence to then be able to design solutions to this problem. She creates inventions that have had an enormous impact on that whole industry. Incredible independent thinker. I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of times this woman has run into people who say, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, you're not capable, that's not the right way to do it, this is the way we've always done it. But she knows, I've got a different brain, I've got to do it a different way. And it has made her a completely independent thinker. Maybe her handicap has made her more independent than if she'd had a kind of normal brain to begin with. She got incredible confidence. Again, incremental small successes. If I can overcome this deficiency, then probably I can go to the next step and overcome that deficiency. And her confidence grew and grew. Incredibly rebellious person. There's a movie about her. And there are several scenes in this movie where she is so hard-headed and she is so rebellious and she just has her idea. That squeeze machine, when she made it at Aunt Burkeen's and she took it back to her mom's house and her mom said, no way, That is not going in your bedroom. You're a normal kid. You're supposed to be being a normal kid. That is so freaking abnormal. And she was rebellious. And she said, I'm doing it. I need this machine. When she got to college, can you imagine? She moves her squeeze machine in with her roommate in college. All right, her roommate's already got a few challenges here with an autistic roommate, but now we've got to have a squeeze machine in our tiny little dorm room, and she's, calming herself down in it all the time. But she didn't care. She's rebellious. She does it her way. Incredible optimism. When all those wranglers were saying, get out of here. We don't have anything to do with you. You don't know what we're doing. You don't know our business. She's optimistic. I can overcome this. I can convince those assholes that there's a better way to do this. Always optimistic. Total hybridization. I mean, what she is doing is engineering. What she's doing is animal husbandry. What she's doing is really a business decision. So she's hybridizing all. It wasn't until she figured out the business and economic side of it that she had an argument for actually implementing this. So she's using many different fields and perspectives to find a solution. She took advantage of mentorship, as we've seen, very fully. Her mom, her Aunt Burkeen, Mr. Carlock. She felt incredibly competitive. These jerks that were the wranglers, that were rejecting her and were being mean to her, she felt super competitive with them. They think they know it all. I know something they don't know. I'm going to show them that this is a better way to do it. And that competition spurred her on. She was incredibly craftsmanlike. She worked hard. She made prototypes. She thought this thing through every step of the way. And her craft and just her knowledge of her field was phenomenal. And there also is this business of extrapolation. She's able to imagine a new way of doing things, take the facts as they are, and then leap somewhere else with them. But she did that in an unconventional way. She did not make her frontal lobe operate the way most people's frontal lobe works. She had to find her own way of using the brain she had to accomplish the kind of goals she had. Phenomenally inspiring person, and I think it challenges all of us to use the neuroplasticity that's inherent in our brain to make ourselves as creative as possible. Okay.